Record. Mic trigger.
Hey friends, this is a very quick video. You should give, I just want to give a big shout out to Richard Smith. For those that don't know, Richard Smith is an artist. He is an artist, musician. He's independent. It's stuff that he does in his spare time, one of his hobbies. So I just want to talk about his music here on the channel, because we promote, or we like to talk about new music, and everybody says, hey Stephen, what new music, excuse me, what new music should I listen to? What music should I buy? All the time, right? Well, you should check out Richard Smith. You should really check his channel, because he's got some good stuff on there. It's mainly orchestral, slightly gothic stuff, most of it. And some of it's just kind of all different acoustic orchestral arrangements. He uses Cubase 8. And his wife, Kate, who helps us out at the RDA, she spoke. She said, "Tell us what you think. Check his channel and tell us what you think." So I thought, well, I'll tell you what. I'll check his channel. I'll tell you what you think, and I'll tell others what I think too. So here's what I think. My thoughts: very polished on production, very smooth on the mixing side of things. I don't really like Cubase for mixing, to be fair, because it's too, it's not, it gives you, I like it. It's not that I don't like it, but it's more for polishing mixes. It's more for kind of, sanding down the, some of the edges, but, you can't sort of refine the corners, if you get me. For example, if you take some vocals on a blues rock track, if you just solo the vocals, and you can push them back a bit, but it takes ages to find the right setting. You could be sat there for ages, and then even when you are happy with something, there's always something else. There's always something else. I remember I was doing, for my one of our music projects, we had to take a track and mix it. And I gave it to my tutor and I said, look, this is, he was happy with it, but I wasn't. And he said, why are you not happy with it? And I said, well, this is what I do, and yada, yada, yada. And he said, well, why don't you take it and work on that a bit more? And I was like, well, not really, because I'm done with it. But he made me take it and mix the guitars. I was actually fed up of listening to the track by this point. I'd listened to it for about, 3 or 4 weeks. Now, it's not that I will not, I'm not one of these people that works on one song and then, goes, I need to move on. I'm not that type of person. But in my eyes, when someone says, right, I want this for this week, you've got to give it them. And I thought, right, well, this is me giving it to you. But later on, I got to mix with other bits of software. Pro Tools is, good for sort of taking the rough edges and smoothing them out. But see, like, Cubase isn't really meant for rock tracks. It's meant for more drum and bass and house. If you want to do something sort of outside the box. A lot of metalers now use Reaper to mix, And I'm not talking about recording. If you want to do a rock track in Cubase, if you want to do a jazz tune in Cubase, be my guest. But when it comes to mixing, It's very, very different. And, you know, I like to have feel. When I'm mixing something, I like to feel what I'm mixing. Even if it's just a mouse on a screen, you know, and I've got someone else there and I'm directing them, I still like to feel what I'm mixing. It's very odd. But even then, if I'm like on an analog mixing desk, I've done this, you know, where I've mixed a track, and there's still, again, I'm like, oh, well, you know, I could do with a touch of this and a touch of that and a touch of the other. And so when I'm mastering it, I'll mix it as I go, changing little bits here and there. You find it actually sounds more interesting doing it that way. You wouldn't do that in a professional surroundings. Well, I don't know. Crumbs, what's his name? There's a brilliant mixing engineer. Crumbs, what was his name? And he repanned the position of the guitars. So it's all up to the mixing engineer where they feel, you know, they're adding some colour to the track, if you say. But, you know, but getting back to Richard Smith, right? Now, I rant a lot about mixing and production when I'm doing music appreciation, because why not? It's what makes a tune, right? And I would say the production is well polished. You know, but I did think on one of the tracks, the organ could have gone a little bit back in the mix, where the strings came in. I mean, but I'd never say, oh, well, that's a bit too much of that and a bit too less of this, because I'm not a record label. And this is the problem. Record labels nowadays, they say, oh, we don't like this, do that. We don't like that, do this, you know. And this is where certain statements need to be made, you know. Which is where, you know, you'll hear a record, and I think these polished productions spend too much time on the mixing. And you would say, well, they spend too much time on the mastering. There is that as well. I mean, mixing engineers and mastering engineers don't get on in my eyes, because mixing engineers mix and mastering engineers master. And all mastering engineers do is make sure that it's right for listening on every type of speaker. Whereas mixing engineers, they don't hear something on every speaker. It helps. There was a Sound on Sound article about the guy who'd mixed a Slipknot record, and he said he wanted to space out the drums from the guitars, and you know, they had to remap the snare, but it's all going. I mean, this is the thing. When you're mixing electronically, it's good to map what you're mixing, not to sort of, you know, because it's easier. Like if you're giving a polished mix, what I would call a polished mix, you know, all the vocals here and that, you know, blah, 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 blah. But hey, what do I know? I mean, I absolutely hate mixing, because there's always something where I think, ooh, it could do with this or it could do with that. I'll tell you a record to listen to, Modern Bodies, the Chicken Hawk album, which was rushed because they had a record deal, but we met the guy who mixed that record. Yes, we met him, funnily enough, and apparently Paul Astick at the time, who was he wasn't our mobility tutor, but he was a mobility tutor at Henshaw's at the time. I don't know what he's doing now. And I remember him saying to me,
2 notifications, reminders, 5 hours ago.
He preferred the remix that he'd done, because he went away and he'd remixed his own drum parts. We knew this because we got to hear it. We got to hear some of the rough recordings for that record. But the drums got taken away and they were remixed. And he said what he did was he put the drum stems, he wanted to put the drum stems on top of the drums that he did, but it wasn't going to work out that way. So what they did was they just, when they'd done the vocals, they'd done everything else. They compressed everything else before the vocals went on. The vocals were pushed back in the mix, but the Modern Bodies recording was not the same production as the Robot song, which was a very different production, and there was lots of time spent on that production. But, I mean, Cubase is good. If you're starting out and you want a polished production, say you're a small artist and you get a record label who says, right, I want you to mix this in 2 weeks. We want to hear this, right? Then Cubase is good for that. You know, it's good to get it done quick and simple. Another thing I like about Richard Smith's music is I like how he's done one piece and done 3 versions of it and mixed it in 3 different ways and mixed the sections in 3 different ways. I mean, my goodness, this guy, if I was his music tutor, I would give him a distinction on all levels, because the guy knows what he's doing on the technical point of things. Where he can actually, I mean, some of it, I wasn't sure if it was played in or not. Some of it you could tell was quantized, but was quantized a quarter of a fraction. But to me, I could tell it was quantized because the way I heard it. In actual fact, if you see on the screen, I know I can't read because of my visual impairment, but you can actually see on the screen where the blocks have been quantized. But there have been blocks that have been unquantized, and he's moved. This is how clever he's done it. Unquantized the block, moved it forward, then gone back. Now, what you can do in Cubase, the new versions, is you can time stretch and split the blocks. The only issue with time stretching and splitting blocks is you have to know where the time is before you actually even split the block. I prefer Cubase SX version 5. So, there you have it. So, I've used Cubase SX 2 and SX4. Well, it wasn't, actually the early version wasn't SX. It was originally Cubase, the early version was Cubase 2 VST. But there was some really good plugins they brought for that. And that's another thing I like about Cubase is its plugins. So I'm wondering if for the pipe organs, were they plugins or were they organs in the actual application? Soft synth. Yeah, the soft synths. There's some really good soft synth libraries for Cubase, but I prefer the plugins. I prefer the add-ons because They're much more interesting. There's lots of free add-ons that have been introduced to Cubase. But anyway, so Richard Smith, my man, hats off to you, sir. Keep creating some great new content. And yeah, you. I just thought that we'd make. I just thought we'd make and talk about. You know what you do, because obviously there's a lot of people that are finding out what you do, and it's really good. Really enjoying it. You know, so that's what we're thinking.
Mic trigger, mic lock, 6:57, mic trigger, mic lock, finish recording.